So the first step is to build up the interproximal, and starting with this step you want to condense the restoration material really well, and I'm using the instrument with the rounded bottom here. So for this tooth, the marginal ridge usually takes about 3 layers. So one layer goes from the bottom of the gingival floor up until the pulpal floor, and another one is you can see it as the bottom half of the pulpal floor, followed by the top half of the pulpal floor up until the surface to the marginal ridge. So here is the bottom 1/3 of that triple layer that I talked about. And here I'm using the tip of the Explorer to get rid of overhang by the cable surface margin. So for what works for me here is have the center of the Explorer tip right up against the metal, and you're going from restoration to margin. So you're using the tip to smear the restoration material across the margin. And here we're ready to build the marginal ridge. So starting with a piece of composite that's flattened a little bit distally into the pulpal floor, I'm compressing it now toward the mesial with the plastic instrument. And notice that the top surface, I'm doing very little to disturb that because I want to have that round bulge from the compression to shape the marginal ridge. So here I'm adding a little bit more material to add a little bit more bulk because I don't quite have enough to fill the margin there. And now I'm smearing a little bit of material across the cable surface margin so we don't have any open margin there. And again, you can use the Explorer technique to clean up any overhang in that area. So here you can see the curvature of the marginal ridge being made. So once you've built out the shape of the marginal ridge and you are satisfied with the amount of overhang and the marginal integrity, you can go ahead and remove the matrix band and convert this into a class 1 restoration. And I find that removing the matrix band is easier in terms of shaping the cusp, but this part is up to you. So here I'm laying down a bottom layer of composite because remember we need to cure it in layers, and if you build out the cusps right away here, the composite would be too thick. And also it makes the shaping a little bit easier later on because you're not using as much material, and you might end up with a void if you just go ahead and fill without this base layer. So for me, I like to start with a mesial buccal cusp. And this first cusp is usually the one that uses the most material. And the reason for that is think of building the cusp as a little mountain top. The existing cusp incline from the remaining two structure serves as a guide. And on the distal part, that little hilltop or downhill incline extends into the distal cusp, the distal buccal cusp. And then similarly, you will have a little bit of extension into the lingual part as shown here. So notice how the angulation of my instrument overlaps into the lingual portion of the restoration right now. And so you're using the overlap as a way to shape the anatomy as well, as we will see later. And now we're ready to do the mesiolingual cusp. So notice I'm using a little bit less material, and I'm again using the existing cuspal incline to create a little mountaintop. So now you can see the overlap between the mesiobuccal cusp and the mesiolingual cusp, where the two downward incline kind of meet at the center of the restoration. So that kind of forms the one half of your central groove. And so that's what I mean by using the overlap as a way to shape the anatomy. And you can also see the shape of the mesiotriangular fossa, just simply from the overlap between the marginal ridge, the mesiobuccal cusp, and the mesiolingual cusp. And from this point on, the principle is the same. You're using the existing cusp incline to make a continuous surface from the restoration to the two structure. And anywhere where there are two inclines meet each other or overlap with each other, that becomes a part of your anatomy or your grooves. And you can notice how I'm using less and less material as we're moving onto the third and the fourth and the fifth cusp. One thing to take advantage of is the shape of the instrument. So on this gold instrument, you have a flat end and then you have an edge on the side. So as you can see, we can use the edge to compress the grooves and accentuate the anatomy. And then you can use the flat side to shape the inclines and the surfaces of the individual cusps. So one thing to always watch for is open margin. So on this distal facial cusp, we can see that there's a little bit of catch in the margin there. So what we can do here is add a very tiny amount of composite material, and like I said before, you can use the shape of the instrument. So here I'm using both the flat side and also the edge side to smear the composite material into the open margin. And it's a very thin layer that you're brushing on, so any excess you should try to get rid of as much as you can. So in terms of the polishing, I like to start with the green cup, and here I'm recreating the occlusal embrasure. So remember, it's not just a 90-degree butt joint going from the interproximal to the occlusal surface. You have to have a little bit of a flaring out from the occlusal embrasure. So that's what the green cup is for here. And you can always use the Explorer to get rid of some small overhang, and just remember to smooth it out afterwards. So that's what I'm doing here. So what worked for me, and not necessarily for everybody, is to try to avoid the grooves as much as possible, the grooves in the fossa. I find that if you polish too hard, it might end up flattening everything. So that's just what works for me. The yellow cup here is a finer grit, so it adds more shine to your composite. I wouldn't suggest you going straight to the yellow cup. Start with the green cup. It'll work, and you won't spend forever using the yellow cup to polish everything down, and it's not going to burn the tooth as much either. For this particular restoration, I didn't really like the contour of the marginal ridge, especially at the occlusal embrasure side. So here I'm using the flame burr as a way to adding more embrasure space. So just be very careful when you're trimming the marginal ridge. You don't want to nick the adjacent tooth. You can also use the flame burr to add more definition to your anatomy. So I'm here using the flame burr again to add more definition to the mesial triangular fossa. So for interproximal overhang, I like to use the polishing strip shown here. So I never wrap it around like a C shape all around the tooth. You want to do it like an S shape as shown here. The only reason I'm wrapping it all around the tooth here is that this is a very fine grit, and just from tactile feedback, you can sort of tell how tight the contact is. So use this at your discretion. So you always want to do QA/QC with the marginal integrity and the overhang. So there was a little bit of overhang in that area. And here's another way to get rid of it using the polishing discs. So just angle it so that you have the polishing side right up against wherever you want to get rid of the overhang or the excess material. And you don't have to worry about the color side. It doesn't have cutting power. It won't polish away the adjacent tooth. With any modifications and changes to your final restoration, just uh, use your own judgment on when to stop. And another final word about the marginal ridge is that you want the height to be the same as the adjacent tooth. So on this number 20, the distal marginal ridge has been restored and it wasn't at the height of the original virgin tooth. So on the practical, you want to make sure that it's at the same height. So with this one, I went a little bit higher, but when we switched back to a virgin tooth, it was about the same height, so kind of lucked out there.